the hood with it. Welcome back to the Collective Clips, where you already know we get it in. But before we get it in, let's hit that like and subscribe button. Ding! Put your notification bell on all so that way you're directing the direction of the dope content I'm kicking. And I highly appreciate all the support, man. We're going up on this channel, and it's all because of you. And for that, I can say I'm very humbled and I'm very much so appreciative. I know I couldn't do it without you. So I was asked a question, so let's talk about it. What's the oldest barrio, hood, in Northern California, right? Now, based off the city you're from, everyone always wants to be the oldest, the first, to do that, the hardest, the craziest, the loco, right? Look, at the end of the day, there's historia. There's a deep, rich history in Northern California, just like there is in Southern California. Now, the barrios in Southern California are older. You know, you're going to have barrios that have been around for a fucking 100 years. Like Dogtown, like White Fence. You know, barrios like Evergreen. And several other hoods, man, down there that have been maintaining and rocking for years. And we're talking about pre-Norte and Sur. We're talking about pre-Norteños, pre-Sureños, Southsiders. Just barrios that have been around, raza influenced, right? Hoods, neighborhoods. Primera Flats and the Maravillas have been around for a very, very long time and are very well respected, right? East LA, you know, a stronghold for Chicanos and for Chicanismo. It just is what it is. But in Northern California, don't sleep on it. There's barrios that have been around for a very, very long time. Okay? Some of them barrios that have been around for a long time, I couldn't tell you the oldest neighborhood, but I could tell you there's barrios like Old Alvarado, right? Dakota. You know, they've been out of the East Bay for several years. There's hoods in Hayward, you know, that have been A Street, you know, that were around predating the Norteño movement. You know, there's a very well-known barrio in San Jose called Vickystown. Now, Vickystown in the 60s and 70s, 50s was around, okay? Now, they were not Norteños, they were not Southsiders. And the historia on Vickystown is this. When Norteños started to be released from prison and started to come out and started to influence neighborhoods and grow neighborhoods and establish and plant flags in Northern California, the same thing that was happening in Southern California, there was vatos now getting out with that tag on their name, calling themselves Southsiders or Sureños. They were moving into these older established barrios and influencing the gente. And vatos were getting jumped in gangs, and that's what it was, right? So now when they went back to prison, not only were they representing their barrio and their hood, but they also were representing the Southern cause. Well, the same thing was happening in the North. So with the hood like Vickystown that was not part of that, they broke off. And half of Vickystown became Norteños, maybe the majority, and the other half became Southsiders. Now, Vickystown is a hood that was established in the Los Angeles area. Okay, and there's other hoods that were established in the Los Angeles area like Barrio Horseshoe. Okay, in San Jose, you have Barrio Horseshoe Parque, a very well and old known neighborhood on the west side, right? But the original establishment of that hood was in LA, Barrio Horseshoe. It's a very old school neighborhood as well. There still are Horseshoe members. You know, I know one personally. So a lot of these hoods, it wasn't that they were copying each other. You know, I know you have like the Ghetto Boys in Merced that are a fairly new neighborhood compared to most neighborhoods, but they are, you know, there is a Ghetto Boys in, of course, Los Angeles too. Dead End as well. You have Whittier, you have Dead End, you have Dead End Harpies, and then of course my neighborhood is Dead End in Merced. And it wasn't a copycat version. It was just our barrio ended in dead ends, and that's what it was, right? Now my neighborhood and several other neighborhoods in Merced are new school. Okay, compared. Been around 30, 40 years now. Nothing compared to the 50, 60, 70, 80 years that a lot of these neighborhoods have been around. But if I was asked a question, which I was, what are some of the oldest neighborhoods in Northern California? I would say most of them come out of the Bay Area. Okay, most of the barrios come out of the Bay Area. And we're talking about Jingletown in Oakland, the 30s in Oaklawn, right? Barrio Oaklawn. We're talking about San Jose, Palmas, Horseshoe, the Mob, Mobsteros. These are some of the older gangs. And of course, Salas, Gilas. Gilroy's been around for a very long time. Eastside Gilas has been around for 50 years. In Salinas, you have the Semsters and Casitas. And then you got Acosta Plaza and the Bahamas that are recent, newer than them other barrios. But even prior to the Semsters, you had a gang out of Salinas called the Fruit Stand Gang, the original East Sider Fruit Stand Gang, which is a very old neighborhood. Now, if you ask me personally, from the history that I know, what is the oldest barrio in Northern California? I would say that was probably San Fran Mission, the Mission District, 22nd and Bryant, 24th and Mission, that area. Okay, Oakland and San Francisco were the hubs back in the days, way back then. And of course, Salinas and San Jose and things like that. So there is a deep, rich history of neighborhoods, but nothing comparable to the neighborhoods in Southern California, the barrios in Southern California. I'm going to explain to you why. See, in Northern California, back in the days, now you have bigger cities like Frisco, which has always been a big city since the gold rush. San Jose, Salinas is not very big, but it's bigger than my city, right? Oakland, a lot of people sleep on Northern California and think because it's spread out, it's just all farmland. But way back in the prehistoric dinosaur days, it was a lot of farmland. There's a lot of open area. Whereas in the LA area, i.e. San Diego, it's more congested and it's closer to Mexico. So what you had is a lot of immigration, a lot of immigrants coming over from Mexico, a lot of paisas, Mexican nationals coming over from Mexico and ingraining themselves in spots like East LA, Compton, Watts, Linwood, of course, the Inland Empire, San Jacinto, all these different areas. San Diego, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump. It's the frontera from Tijuana, right? That's what you had. Tijuana, like a white guy from Tijuana, right? From Tijuana. And that's what you had. So these barrios is what they're called, right? These barrios have been around for a longer in Southern California because what you had is a lot of the immigration coming over from Mexico and establishing themselves in there. And then what do paisas do? They take the jobs that nobody else wants and they work the fields. And a lot of the fields were located in Northern California. Past Bakersfield, it's all fields. So you would have Delano and Bakers and all these different cities. And these spices that were coming from LA, they would migrate and they would work the fields. They'd follow the fields. Now, there were some, of course, fields in the Valles in Southern California. San Fernando Valley had a lot of fields going on. So there was a lot of paisas working there. That's why in those Valles, you have a big influence of raza. Raza goes where the work's at, period. It's how it's always been. Everyone thinks it's where the gangbanging's at. No, the gangbanging just starts, by the younger generations. But literally, the Mexicano people, the brown people follow the fields. And they found the fields up in Northern California, so they started to establish these migrant camps in these cities and towns, and gangbanging started. I'm just real with it, and I tell you, a lot of the influence in Northern California did come from Southern California, in fact. The cholos, the low riding, a lot of it also was derived from Texas. In Texas, you had the pachucos, the zoot suiters. That influence combined with the LA mentality and the Southern California mentality of la raza is what, was ingrained into the younger generation's mind. And then you had prison going on and these prison organizations becoming established in prison and soldados hitting the streets and setting up regiments and setting up, different pockets and doing their business. And that's all we're going to speak on about that. But in Northern California, the barrios are not as old as Southern California. And the reason being is it was Mexicanos from the South that moved and migrated into the North. I get asked all the time, when did the Southsiders start or the Sureños start, the Upstaters start in Northern California? They've always been there, bro. They have always been there. They weren't as deep as they are now, but they have always had some type of influence. Have always been there. Now, of course, in the 90s is when the Southern movement took a foothold in cities like Santa Cruz, Richmond, Vallejo, different cities in the Bay Area. Like I said, it all starts in the Bay and leaks into the Valle. And you would think it'd be the other way around, that the Valle, because they have more farmlands, fameros, right? That it would be the other way around, but it just isn't that. There's always that big city influence. Everyone always wants to be from that big city. In San Jose, like I said, when people started to parole north and south into these neighborhoods, man, there were splits that was happening, like Vickystown. Soho is always going to be a stronghold for Norteños. That's just what it is. No matter how many Southsiders and Upstaters there are there, and there's a lot. There's quite a few, right? And I remember in the 90s, it wasn't like you could cruise. And I got locked up in the early 90s, but, You know, when I did get out in 96, in the late 90s, we'd cruise into Sanjo, go to fucking, it's always been a cruise night style on Story and King. It was always popping, man, on Cinco de Mayo and Frisco and Sanjo and Oakland. And so you would cruise into these areas and you didn't see a Southern presence. They weren't out there on the streets like that. But little by little, nowadays they are. They kick it at their fairgrounds, or they have their little spots. And there's a lot of shoot 'em up, bang bang that goes on. A lot of gang banging, definitely in Northern California. It's a vast difference in Northern California to Southern California, where in Southern California, it's more barrio versus barrio. And it's been like that. Your enemigas on the next block, and boom, catch them slipping at fucking 7-Eleven. Whereas in Northern California, it's always been more so north and south, getting into it. As far as Mexicans. Then, of course, in the 80s, when Colors came out, Crips and Bloods from LA started to move in and set up shop, dope houses in places like Sacramento, Stockton. Never the Bay Area. The Bay Area has always been different. The Bay, the blacks out of the Bay have always been just about the Bay and the Bay movement. So you don't see too many Crips and Bloods in the Bay, if not too many at all, right? But the Norteños and the Southsiders have always had a presence in the Bay and the Valley. That's the truth, and that's a fact. You just didn't see the Southerners wiggling out there like that because, man, there was too many Northerners and it'd be all bad. True. But as far as some of the oldest barrios, I'd say like Dakota and several neighborhoods in San Jose and Oakland, and of course Frisco. Now, when you get into the Central Valley, I could tell you about Merced. You know, we have old barrios like the West Side and Barrio Merced Rifa, the M14ers. But even predating that, there was barrios like the Posse, Northside Playboys, barrios like 11th Street, who kind of were way back in the days, then fell off and then came back as youngsters. Now they're no longer available, right? That's over for them. Barrios like 12th Street, I remember, when my neighborhood started, and it started with a group of friends that went to middle school called Tenaya, right on the west side of Merced. Those that know what I'm talking about. And even my neighborhood was not called Dead End in the beginning. It was called the Boys from the Hood. It was a play off the movie Boys in the Hood, the Boys from the Hood. And I remember we used to wear hats, the boys, all that. And that's crazy now that I see these ghetto boys, which are actually an offshoot of Dead End. And I've told the story in the history on that, right? They were once Dead End Pee-wees, and then they became the Ghetto Boys, which is GB, the rapper's neighborhood. And they were established in 96, 97. Facts. Truth, right? And so a lot of the neighborhoods and the gangs in Merced, in my city, are fairly new compared to these gangs in LA or even the gangs in the Bay. And it's like I said, depending upon where you're from, there's always going to be people that say my neighborhood's older or more established or harder or stronger. And one never knows, does one? The one thing I know for sure, it's not about where you're from, it's about where you're at in that particular moment, right? I know if I'm going to San Jose, now if I'm going to San Jose, right? Because it's about to get to popping from everyone. But, back in the days, Sanjo had a lot of respect, and they had a lot of respect because they had the viejos, right? Sanjo viejos, then the sharksteros, and then of course Sanjoneros, and the B's and the V's, and they have all different types of things they do. Now, Sacramento has also been around for a long time. Sacra, the Diamonds, the Gardons, Franklons. These are neighborhoods that have been around for a very, very long time. But Sacramento's always been a little bit different from everyone else because Sacramento has rocked black and browns tough for many, many situations and many, many generations, right? What you have in Sacramento compared to a lot of the other cities, like in my neighborhood, it's just Norteños. And then, of course, you have brothers, man, on the west side, the Pyrus and the Merced Gangster Crips and whatever. But we didn't share a barrio or a neighborhood with blacks. It was just a brown thing. They had their neighborhoods, we had ours. Where in Sacramento, a lot of these neighborhoods, just like in LA, in some of these neighborhoods like Grape Street, Watts, and some areas of Compton, right? They share neighborhoods. They're all in the same neighborhoods. They just got different names or different placazos or whatever. And speaking of Compton, hey, can I get at you where my primo's from? He's from a very old established barrio in Compton. But people don't know the history of Compton. See, Compton was a suburb. Compton was a middle-class neighborhoods with whites. It was a white middle-class neighborhood city back in the days. And then after the Watts riots and a few other things happened, there was a reverse gentrification. A lot of blacks started to come in, and that's why you got the NWAs and all that influence. The brothers were deep, but there was always little pockets and barrios of Mexicanos, tortilla flats and largos and CV3s and these different 155s, these different neighborhoods, right? And now it's almost to the point where Mexicans and blacks are 50-50. It's half and half, and the whites said, we're going to Beverly Hills, brother, right? Got coffee? They were out of there. That's how it is. In Southern California, man, it's different. You know, and I can't tell you the whole history because that's not where I'm from. That's not where I grew up, but I respect it. See, as a norteño or someone who comes from Northern California, you need to respect and understand that every barrio in Northern California was influenced by Southern California. Unless it's some new school shit that wasn't. Okay? That's the facts. That's the truth. And I know a lot of people hate me because they hate me, and they also hate me because I spit the realness. But that's just what it was. But a lot of these neighborhoods in Northern California as well as Southern California, they do predate North and South. It's funny, man. I hear a lot of these guys that don't know their history talking about, this organization or this organization was started by guys from up north or guys from down south, Sureños and Norteños. There was none of that until the 80s. That label and that tag was not put on anyone. It was just a bunch of Mexicans, raza from Barrios, Chicanos, that were fighting amongst their own for power and to say their barrio was primera. That's what it was. Then when that prison influence came out to the streets, that's when Vatos started to choose up and decide what they were going to rock with. Now, in Northern California, the upstate movement was established because there was bullying going on. There was a lot of fucking shit going on between Chicanos and Paisas at the time. Facts, right? I used to have homeboys that used to pick on Paisas and try to bully them. Hey, homie, these are Southsiders. I used to say, no, they're Mexican nationals. Homies, they're Paisas. They're our people. They're our gente. They work hard, bro. You know, I'm not going to rob them. I'm not going to lay them down. You know, you're going to fucking sit there and bump corridos and then go rob a paisa. It just makes no fucking type of sense, right? To hurt your own gente. But I still had homeboys, whatever, right? And they were doing their thing. I was never a part of that because I didn't believe in that. I didn't believe that's what the Norteño movement was about. I believed we were about canalismo and our push, man, for social status of equality. That's what I believed in. That's what I still believe in, right? For them. I'm no longer part of that movement, but I believe. I'm a true believer. And no one can twist that. And I know there are those that don't like Norteños that were once part of that, and all they want to do is wolf and talk shit about them. That's not never going to be me. I respect the forefathers, the elders, the people who laid the foundation down. I respect the movement. Facts. Whether you hate it or love it, whether you don't like me, it's just is what it is. But as far as some of the oldest barrios in Northern California, Dakota, Alvarado, San Jose and Salas, of course, Gilas, Watsonville, very old neighborhoods in Watson. You got to give them the respect. And and then you got way up in like Shasta County and Humboldt and all that, Chico and gangs like that. I mean, there's an old barrio in Livermore, old barrio in Napa, but none of these neighborhoods are going to be as old other than maybe Frisco, the Mission District, and Oakland, Jingletown, and of course, like I said, the 30s, I think it's 38th Street. These vatos have been around for a long time. Now, when I see rappers nowadays, Northern California rappers from up north, saying that the Southsiders are trying to copy them in the rap game and this and that, no, that's not what's happening. Let me explain to you what's happening and why Norteños move the way they do. The Bay Area has always had an influence in everything, North and South. The Bay Area has always been ahead of the curve and ahead of the game in a lot of shit, just like LA has, right? And people see the Bay Area dancing a certain way, the hyphy movement. They see people dressing a certain way, wearing grills and certain jackets and clothes, and they start modeling themselves after that. Now, you got to understand there's a lot of Norteño neighborhoods, old school neighborhoods in the Bay. In San Francisco and Oakland and Richmond and Vallejo and Basuclas, Westside Basuclas, Berkeley and Richmond, all these different areas, right? So because there was big interaction between blacks and browns in the Bay, they never beefed or hated on each other. There was a lot of rocking together. A lot of that brother influence that Bay influence went into the Norteño cause. That's the truth of the matter, right? That's why you see Vatos from the Bay, they have a different swag. I'm talking about Norteños, a different lingo or dialect compared to those of the Valle. Because in the Valley, it was more so the blacks had their neighborhoods, the Mexicans had their neighborhoods. It was cool. Sometimes it wasn't. It was what it was. Whereas in the Bay, it was all black and brown. That's where the movement started. That's where it was established, right? And that's just how it is. There's never been big beef between black and brown in Northern California as there was in Southern California. Period. Okay? So as far as, the question I was asked, some of the oldest neighborhoods, San Francisco, San Jose, and Oakland are going to have the oldest neighborhoods. And I'll tell you this right now, for facts, none of the neighborhoods in Northern California are as old as those in Southern California. And that's just the truth of the matter, right? And I believe the oldest established barrio, and I mean, there was, motherfuckers used to wear leather jackets and shit back in the days. They were called the Golden Dragons and shit. Way back in the 40s and 50s and 30s when Buddy Holly was doing his thing and Richie was fucking singing fucking Tadana. But there's been neighborhoods in Southern California for a very long time, and Northern California as well. People like to say, oh, they're Norteño barrios. Norte didn't start, the Norteño label didn't start to the 80s. Neither did the Sur. And that's just the fucking truth and real history. With that being said, are you guys ready for Super Norteño today? That's gonna let me know. Let me know in the comments so I can fucking hit you with one upside your head. It's gonna actually involve the Bay Area. I told you a little bit about it yesterday, man. We're gonna get it popping today. Thank you guys. I appreciate all the support. And I gave it to you the history as real as I could. Again, man, I don't know. I've never been to certain places, so I don't know the oldest exact neighborhood. I don't think it matters, man. Like I said, it doesn't matter where you're from. It matters where you're at. Shout! The gun. Raza.